Hi, good morning. Welcome to Lumin. My name is Val Newcomb, and I am Head of Marketing and Communications for the company, and I'm happy to introduce our team this morning to talk about the impact of dynamic energy pricing for your customers and what Lumin can do to help solve that. First, let me introduce our panel. Happy to have three great fellows around the table here with me today. First, Kevin O'Shea. He is our co-founder and Chief Commercial Officer. Kevin has a long track record in software and utility scale solar in particular, and he has had many successes over the years bringing early stage companies to commercial success. So we're happy to have Kevin kick us off here this morning. Next, in from California is my colleague Brian Sullivan. Brian is Head of Data Engineering. He has a background in streaming and gaming and is a self-professed algorithm data nerd, and most recently was with Netflix, and that's a brand many of you are familiar with, especially in terms of their personalized interface and how smart really their dashboard is and getting to know customer preferences and that sort of thing. So we're happy to have Brian on board. He's the one making our platform as smart as it is. And then finally, my colleague John Profit. He is the Director of Applications Engineering. John's background is in energy efficiency and residential solar. I call him our MVP because he really bridges the gap between really what's happening with our product and our engineering here in the lab, and then what you guys are facing with your customers in the field. And John helps bring our solutions to market. So just a quick look at the agenda today. We will be spending about 20 minutes on slides and then have a Q&A session at the end. Please use the dashboard to send us a question, and we'll get to that at the end of the conversation. And without any further ado, I want to introduce Kevin O'Shea to kick us off.
Thank you, Val. And here I thought I was the Lumin MVP. Yeah, I guess if I take a back seat to anybody, it's John. But anyway, thanks to everybody for joining. This is Kevin O'Shea, Chief Commercial Officer, co-founder at Lumin. Joined Alex very, very early at the inception of the company when he had this great idea. So I will be covering a little bit about some market trends, and yeah, we're going to focus on what we're here to focus on, which is dynamic electricity pricing and time of use pricing, and how Lumin's technology, our energy management platform, can be used to help aid that. So as we know, in the grid, we're at this really interesting juxtaposition between yesterday and tomorrow, which means today. But the grid of yesterday was designed for a one-way flow of electricity with a centralized power plant. So we have roughly $7 trillion invested in this transmission and distribution network. It's served us well, but moving into tomorrow, the question is not if, but when. It's how quickly will we get to tomorrow? Depending on who you talk to, the rate of change, rate of acceleration is very fast into the grid of tomorrow, which will feature local generation, obviously. It will feature local microgrids. And really what we're here to focus on today is probably the bottom two, which is that electricity pricing is going to be dynamic. It's going to be more in line with supply and demand, and storage will feature heavily in this grid of tomorrow. So at Lumin, as a company that is really dedicated to bringing technology to the grid edge, we're excited to be in this juxtaposition. We're excited to be in the grid of today, which has some elements of yesterday and some of tomorrow, and moving pretty rapidly toward tomorrow, we feel like. And we feel like we have technology that can help usher in the grid of tomorrow, and hopefully you'll get a good feel for that as we go through the slides and talk more about the product and what we're up to. So the problem or the challenge or the opportunity is that really to recognize this future, this grid of tomorrow, we can't get there unless we have a deep understanding and control of energy usage at the edge of the grid. And we're focused on residential applications and light commercial applications today. And yeah, it's an exciting opportunity. Timothy Rogan here at National Grid said it really well, and in that the load management piece is kind of the missing piece, and that's where solar plus storage systems are heading. Excuse me, we're working closely with pretty much all of the major storage OEMs. And the reason is because they all understand this problem. This is a problem that inhibits adoption of storage, that makes storage kind of static and not super awesome when it comes to time of use or dynamic pricing. And that is indeed the missing piece of the puzzle that we at Lumin with our energy management platform are helping to solve. And we'll talk more about how we solve that, obviously, going forward. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody on this call, but the reason that storage is on the rise is because of this mismatch between our production and consumption. This delta that you see in the middle, historically, folks and consumers and homeowners have been able to sell their net excess electricity back to the utility, but those days are numbered. Certainly in California and Hawaii and in places like that where solar adoption and penetration is high, those measures are already in place, and utilities have the policies where that net metering is no longer a thing. But there's other factors other than net metering that are driving this global residential energy storage movement. And one of which is what we're here to talk about today, and that is across the board, utilities are introducing and looking to adopt dynamic pricing mechanisms, be it time of use or demand-based rates. So that is on the rise. Also, kind of sadly, is that natural disasters seem to be increasing, and people want to be prepared. They want resilient systems that can sense when the grid is out and know their preferences, and can adapt to their personal preferences to drive their investment. And then also trend-wise, and again, narrowing in a little bit to what we're here to talk about today, that is that what I'm showing in the graph to the right, this is a typical kind of time of use rate. This one was pulled from Southern Cal Edison, I believe, rate structure, but very kind of standard. So flat electricity pricing, relatively low electricity pricing, in this case up till about 4 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock, the price for electricity doubles or triples. And that's pretty typical. And this is kind of a problem, because if you look at your solar production curve in green, it is also out of phase typically with these time of use rates. So this has led to the growth of storage, and has led to what Timothy Rogan indicated, that, hey, we need to be able to do load management here. We need to be able to do load shedding and intelligently manage our loads to map to these time of use rates. And so it all, we feel like, bodes well for our grid edge technology. As most of us know, in the state of California, how many people live in California? A lot, but it'll be mandatory. So time of use is not optional. It's not opt-in, not opt-out. It's just a thing. It's mandatory come October 2020. 50% of investor-owned utilities have introduced time of use pricing with very low adoption rates, and partly because storage adoption is low, partly because people don't want to change their habits. So they need technology like ours, that can sense these rates and help them with their consumption. So what's the solution? What do we have at Lumin that can help with this time of use mismatch? At a high level, for us, the solution includes control and data, and it also includes automated intelligence. So, and we'll talk more about what that means and how that works, but that is control that knows what the electricity pricing is, that knows what your solar production is, that knows what the charge state of your battery is, and that can begin to make decisions for you based on your preferences and what you want to accomplish. And yeah, just being able to control your demand as well is obviously an important piece of that equation. I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail on the Lumin platform and how it works and what it is. So it's a hardware and software solution. You see the hardware on the right-hand side. It's a box that sits above or below or to the right of your distribution panel. It wires simply, Brian will talk more about that. It's a 2-hour installation of the box. And in the box is where we have relays that allow for this remote and intelligent control of electricity. We're also measuring current and voltage 10,000 times a second and passing that data up to the cloud. But it's the software, and Brian will be happy to hear that since he's the software guy. It's the software that is really where the magic happens. The hardware is the enabler. The hardware is what allows us to make intelligent decisions for the consumer based on their habits, their savings goals, lifestyle, and what's going on as far as electricity pricing. And yes, the hardware is ready to go. We're shipping product every day now. It's UL compliant, and yeah, we look forward to getting some in your markets if it makes sense. Then the final slide for me, and I will turn it over, I promise, is talking about the problems that Lumin specifically helps to solve with storage installation. So residential energy storage, the acronym that we use is RES. So we talked yesterday to lots of folks about whole home energy backup and eliminating the sub panel. But if you look at the bullets in the middle three, that's what we're here to talk about today, which is building a technology, building a platform that is responsive to customers' needs, that is responsive to your preferences, that is responsive to pricing of electricity, that's controllable, automated, and flexible, and can make decisions for you with your input about your electricity usage and being able to manage your loads and shed loads appropriately so that we can leverage these time of use programs. So that's my story. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sullivan to talk in a little bit more detail about how it works.
All right, so as Kevin was saying, this is, it's a hardware and a software solution. And so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how the hardware works. And so it wires into your circuit panel, the hardware does. And it gives you a sense of, once your Lumin panel arrives, you got the shiny new box, you have your existing circuits. We can connect currently, we support up to 12 lines in your circuit breaker box. And the idea is that we wire, the electrician will install and wire in series with those circuits. So it's in between the circuit breaker and the load, and it allows us to be in the path such that we are able to both measure and control the power along that line. And so in the newest hardware release, we actually also have the ability to measure the electricity across the whole home, and then we're also building out control for other smart devices. And so what this acts as is a control center to both measure and control the electricity usage within the home, both at the circuit level and then to a finer degree for other types of devices. From a hardware installation standpoint, it is something that is pre-wired, such that it comes in a box with two sets of the 12 lines coming out of it, and your electrician can wire this into the circuit breaker in under 2 hours, and then you're good to go. So from as soon as you plug it into the panel, instantly it's collecting data and measuring at, Kevin said, as Kevin said, it was 10,000 times a second is the sample rate. The panel then takes this data and aggregates it to the second level, stores it locally within the Lumin Smart Panel, as well as sends it up to the cloud. and that allows us to have rich metrics and analytics for the customer to see, for the homeowner, so you can get a sense of the breakdown of the electricity usage by category. They can get really fine-grained data down to the second level or zoom out to the week or the month, and then have this remote access to this data from anywhere on the cloud. We can then start adding in external data sets around weather data to help look at the impact of hot or cold on the load within the house. We can use utility rates, and this is really important for the types of variable types of utility rates that we're talking about on this webinar, to get a better sense of the detail of how those cost structures work, a mixture of time of use rates or demand charges, and get a sense of how that could combine with the usage of the electricity in the home. And then some of these utilities are also doing a great job at actually publishing in real time the energy mix, which is, on the grid right now. I know in California, I can look and see how much is solar and how much is natural gas and how much is wind. You can marry that to someone's personalized home usage and actually compute an energy footprint or a CO2 footprint for that individual home. From a Lumin standpoint, one of the differentiators, there are other products in the market that can actually measure your data, some even at the per circuit level, but there are very few options for actually having automated control or remote control of these circuits within the home. And so we allow that through a number of different ways. One is direct user control, so someone can actually log into their Lumin dashboard and be able to control their circuits directly via the web or their phone. But we also have the ability to set up some automated schedules to have circuits powered on or off, maybe overnight. We want to reduce vampire load or disable high load devices like your dryer during peak times. There's some automation that we build out where you flip into maybe an off-grid mode or a time of use mode or a peak demand mode, where we get a sense of your preferences and the limitations of the parameters in which we want to live within, and the system is able to drive what happens within the home. And then there's also all sorts of recommendations that Lumin can provide around usage behavior, and I'll talk more about these in the next slide. But there's things that we can suggest that actually happens from the actual homeowner's perspective to take action in the physical world that may or may not be automated. In the sense of off-grid mode, we can actually detect being off-grid. We can look at the appliance signatures, the demands of each appliance. We can take all of the historical data and build usage predictions based off of time of day, and then marry all that data with user preferences about what we want to do in this off-grid mode. What's the limitations of the battery? What's the runtime that I'm looking to get? And then lastly, look at the household behavior for cues about what we should be enabling or disabling at any given time. And so what that allows is we can get ahead of an event, maybe for some battery preparation in lowering the consumption in the home before a potential grid outage. We can extend the runtime by lowering the average usage to get more out of the battery, more out of the energy that's sitting in the battery. But most importantly, we have this idea of dynamic circuit access, or this dynamic protected loads panel that is able to limit what is active in the home at any given time to give effectively full run of the house, but not necessarily all at the same time. And so we can enable only the circuits that are important at that moment. So this is happening autonomously, but with user input. And it's similar to other types of modes that the Lumin system can be put in, which is looking at similar signals and then also some additional information. So looking at how much usage do you have so far this month, this billing cycle. Again, looking at the demand signatures, the usage prediction of this time of day or this time of week, and then looking at the preferences the user has set. Here's how restrictive I want to be, or here's how much I want to lean into Lumin having control of my system. Here are my goals. And then again, taking cues from the household behavior. And now, instead of trying to manage an off-grid scenario, What we're doing is much more longer term, and it's day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, and be looking at taking all of this information about your home's usage and then looking at, okay, well, what are your utility rate details? How is the utility going to dynamically charge you for your consumption? And then the levers that Lumin has at its disposal is around load shedding or throttling or deferral. And the idea is that we can take things like your electric water heater and then either turn it off because you are in a demand charge scenario where you're also trying to use your stove. So let's hold off on using your water heater for a while until that then until the load in the house comes back down and I can get some cycles in the water heater. So there's things that Lumin can do automatically, but I think for longer term type behavior, one of the things that's really powerful is suggesting, hey, instead of me driving things in the background, which is also powerful, and maybe you won't even notice I'm doing that, let's set up some suggestions about what you could set up for a schedule. Do you want to approve this? Is this something that you would like me to do for you? And so we get a kind of a communication loop with the user, so we're not just doing things in the background. So if it's not subtle, let's engage the user and get them to agree. And then there's also things that we can do just in suggesting a very personalized, hey, I know what your usage is. It's not just a best practice for normal houses in your area. I know what you're doing, what the load in the house is in the morning. I know what the load is in the afternoon. Here are some suggestions on maybe not doing your laundry in the evening. I know that's convenient, but hey, did you know that if you moved it to the morning, you can save X%? And then lastly, again, from a very personalized perspective, we can detect inefficient appliances or things that we can do that are suggestions to the homeowner to make physical changes to their home that have much longer term impact. And so, even though that refrigerator in the garage that you put out there, just to have an extra, bit of storage, did you know that that's an old fridge and that's taking up a ton of juice? So it allows us to give a lot more actionable steps that we can give to the homeowner and then have a net effect on their energy consumption. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John Profit. If you guys have any questions, definitely drop them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. So you've now heard from Kevin a bit about why Lumin and the energy management platform were created. You've also heard from Brian about how it works and what data, control, and smart circuits can do to optimize energy use to specific rate structures. So now what I'll do is I'll spend a few minutes going over a couple of scenarios of what this actually looks like for you, your customers, and throw in a couple of case studies to shed some light on this and just bring a little bit more detail to the concepts here. So Brian did a terrific job of mentioning smart circuits and energy automation and scheduling and really what data can do for homeowners and installers and what it can do for customers ultimately. So we see three primary ways that we can help combat dynamic pricing, that we can help optimize energy use based on rate structures. The first being insights. So with this really granular energy data, like Kevin mentioned, the 10,000 samples a second and getting pushed to the cloud once a second, we can get as accurate and precise data as anything out there. And what this allows us to do is really just nail down what your energy habits look like. And then we can start to isolate those based on the peak time of use zone. So in this first graph here, you can see about a day's worth of energy on April 7th for a particular homeowner. And each one of these colors indicates a different appliance or a different circuit in the home. And this is pretty similar. This kind of looks like the duck curve that Kevin was showing earlier, where it's relatively low energy use at night. The family wakes up and that yellow indicates some cooking on the stove. The purple indicates some water heater, probably for showers and maybe washing some dishes. The negative downward bars represent your solar production. And then as that starts to ramp down, everybody comes home for the evening and starts that process all over again, perhaps putting in a little bit more entertainment with TV or cable boxes, DVD players, video games, and things like that. So Unfortunately, with a lot of these time of use rates, that afternoon and early evening energy use usually coincides with when it's most expensive. But what we like to do here is really just tell you this is what's using energy in your home, this is when it's using energy, and this is how much it's going to cost you. So we can start to figure out what that average cost per peak time of use zone is. And then, like Brian said, start to create suggestions on how to lower those particular expenditures at the circuit level. The next thing we can do is we can enable you to set schedules. So on the right-hand side here, this is just a screenshot from our Lumin portal, where one particular homeowner that was using their Lumin Smart Panel decided to just create a schedule to remind themselves not to use certain appliances, certain really energy-intense appliances during those peak time of use rates. They went ahead and threw in dishwasher, dryer, washer, just things that they don't necessarily need to do because that particular homeowner was able to do those things either in the morning or perhaps they're a night owl and didn't mind doing them later in the evening. But what that can do is significantly help them save on their energy bills at the end of each month. And then, of course, the last thing is for your homeowners who don't really want to look at all of this data. They don't really want to do the schedules. They just want to tell Brian, hey, I only want to pay X dollars a month. Can you help me out? And then letting Lumin do the rest of the work for you. And that's where we get the most excited, and that's where we're really differentiating ourselves in the market here is with those smart circuits and being able to intelligently optimize that energy use based on your preferences, based on your habits, and ultimately your energy saving goals. The next thing that I'll talk about is demand charges. So we know that time of use rates are becoming more and more popular, and unfortunately, we're starting to see demand charges get trickled in certain markets as well. You know, Kansas, Missouri, Arizona, a couple of other places. We're starting to see these come online, and you know, they're really just a way that seems like the utility is combating solar penetration in markets, or so it seems. So what we can do on the demand charges is very similar. You tell Lumin, I don't want my demand charge to exceed X dollars or X kW. And once you set that limit, then we can make recommendations on how to stay below that limit, and then we can provide alerts anytime you're getting too close to that limit, and then ultimately we can help you avoid those high demand charges. We can take it a step further, and Brian alluded to this earlier as well, that you know there are certain key appliances in a home that will just automatically turn on and off on their own, whether that be your water heater or your HVAC system. And then there are others that have high energy use when you turn them on. And if you tell us your preferences, then we can begin to start cycling those appliances so that one appliance will never turn on at the exact same time as the other, eliminating some of that surge and also keeping that overall demand down. So Brian mentioned water heater and stove. It could be your water heater and your HVAC system. It could be your stove and your washer. It could be your water heater, washer, and dryer, and stove. You just tell us what makes the most sense for you, and we can make sure that those key appliances aren't all running at the same time. And a lot of this will happen in the background so that the homeowner may not even know that we're disabling certain circuits, because a water heater, for example, if it's a storage tank, will continue to keep that water hot up until you finish cooking your meal for the night, and then it will turn itself back on and start heating again, and perhaps you never knew. So the next slide here these are just a few case studies. So we took a look at some homes that had Lumin Smart Panels installed, and we took a look at how those homeowners were using their schedules and how they were interacting with their Lumin Smart Panels. And you can see in the first case study here, this is a California time of use case study, and it was a particular time of use rate that had peak rates at about 37 cents. I think it was a PG&E tariff. And the off-peak ones were about 18, so there was a delta there of about 19 cents per kilowatt hour. And this particular homeowner set some schedules to remind themselves not to run their washing machine, not to run their dryer, and not to run their dishwasher, the same few that we saw on that schedule in the previous slide. And what that did is, and actually there was a few other ones that they had put in there that I'm not showing, but what that did is that deferred about 88 kilowatt hours of electricity that they shifted from those on-peak to an off-peak time. and it saves them about a little over $200. Now, we've looked at this on some other case studies where perhaps you just want to start to eliminate some of your vampire loads. So these could, again, be things like washers and dryers, or perhaps it's a branch circuit that's running to an office, those various other things that are just sucking power even when they're not on. With a little bit of scheduling, you can begin to shut those down at night when you're sleeping and you're never using them to begin with. And on average, we're seeing a lot of homeowners who are saving upwards of $100 by just, squashing those vampire loads or standby loads. And, you combine those with your time of use rate reduction, and you're talking, plus $300 savings. The next thing that we show here in scenario 3 or case study 3 is demand charges. So we know that Arizona has one of the higher demand charges based on your rates, and there are a lot of different rate structures. But we ran a scenario here where with a particular homeowner, we saw what will happen if we make sure that when the range is on or the stovetop is on, we don't allow that homeowner to run their dryer or run their water heater at the same time. And then if the dryer is running, we turn the water heater off. So it was just a priority of range first, then dryer, then water heater. And this brought their original peak of about 9 kW down to 6.5. And that was a total savings of about $32. So that homeowner is seeing almost $400 of savings there per year, just using their Lumin Smart Panel to squash or shave off some of those demand charges. So we know that there are lots of different rate structures out there and lots of different markets. So if you guys as installers out there have customers with a particular rate structure and you're curious about, what can Lumin Smart Panel do for my customers and their particular rate structures, we welcome that kind of feedback. You just tell us what your rate schedules look like, and we're happy to run these types of models for you so you can go back and say, hey, we think this is a good idea for you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. This is what we think this energy management platform can do in terms of savings, and we recommend it be part of your solar or your solar and storage system. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kevin to wrap up this webinar. And of course, if you have questions about any of this, we hope to answer them at the end.
Thanks, John. Finally, on go-to-market. So how do we get our hands on some Lumin energy management platforms and start to make this a reality for some of our customers? So that's what Val and I and John and others are tasked with. So we'd love to entertain the conversation with you. We have an exciting tiered partnership program, which is gaining traction with our installers. Love to introduce that to you. I won't wear you out with all the details here. I will have my contact information on the next slide. Feel free to share that and scratch that down and follow up with me after. Val and her team are working hard on both our demo portal and our partner portal. The demo portal is a live link actually to our Lumin Insights software so that you can share that, use that yourself to see what kind of data and insights that Lumin turns up. The partner portal is where all your resources will be for implementation. So you'll have installation resources there, installation manuals, guides, videos, things like that. There'll be marketing resources and sales resources there as well to just help you and your team with communicating the value of Lumin. The model that we're using is a direct to installer approach. So you would purchase your Lumin smart panels and the energy management platform from us directly, and then install and with the appropriate markup for your customers. So I'm not sure if some questions came in, but
yeah, let me take a look. How does Lumin Tech work to reduce the time of use demand charges in conjunction with the same functionality provided by energy storage?
So, I think if your demand in the house is actually being managed by other systems, I'd say one way we do that is that the user will be able to specify whatever parameters they would like Lumin to be acting under. So if they want to have us act within a certain limit, we can do that. Generally speaking, I'd say that most storage providers can't reduce the load. So we would be living within the limits that we set in the configuration. The battery is trying to provide power that whole time, and so we can work with any energy, any storage platform. We are working with more direct connectivity to storage system APIs, and then we'd have a much more direct back and forth and communication between our platform and the Lumin Smart panel. But as it exists, we should be able to handle the demand reduction side. Meanwhile, your storage system is handling the energy providing side.
Yeah, I'd say that's the right way to think about it, Brian. Yeah, I think it gets back to what Timothy Rogan had to say from National Grid, is that it's the load side that the technology is lacking. It's the load side that needs the intelligence, and that's the piece of the puzzle that the Lumin panel delivers to the market. And it's a great complement to the intelligence in the battery systems.
Another question. Will Lumin know my utility rate schedules, or do I have to program that for my customers?
So we're working on that on that data layer now. As I believe John was talking about, utility rates are very complicated, and so we're looking to have a library or a set of data where we can actually understand local market rates. I think there's always going to be nuances for the different plans and making sure our data is up to date. We're always going to have the ability for users to tweak the rates that we understand to make sure that we're tuning someone's usage to be as accurate as possible.
Just one more question here, and then we can wrap it up. If anyone else has more questions, please feel free. But this question is, if I have a handful or a dozen or so customers with a Lumin, would I be able to have a fleet view of what's happening with their energy use? Because maybe we'll want to promote energy savings and, help spur more sales that way.
Yes. Yeah. So we definitely have support for aggregating Lumin panel metrics. We're, continuing to make that better all the time. But yeah, we definitely, we like to look at the data coming from the Lumin panels from a number of different lenses. There's both the homeowner view, and honestly, they may have multiple panels within the home, so we can aggregate that way. We like to think about things from an aggregated perspective, from an installer perspective, because there's a whole life cycle there we want to be able to support. And then we want to be able to think about things even from a regional perspective, just to kind of get a sense of how different markets behave, whether that's for our purposes of better understanding markets, or for installers or regional providers to better understand energy usage within a market.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that covers it. We'll wrap up the webinar now, and this will be posted on our website under the webinars tab if anyone would like to revisit it or share with their teams. Thanks.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.